The night the most powerful millionaire in Boston collapsed, over 50 men stood around him, and no one could save him. Not the doctors. Not the bodyguards. Not the money that had bought him everything his whole life. And then, through the crowd, 2 tiny girls in worn shoes stepped forward, the daughters of a poor maid he had once threatened to destroy. What happened next didn't just save his life. It broke a heart that had been frozen for 22 years. If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances touch your heart, make sure you subscribe and stay with me. Some stories don't just entertain, they heal. Harrison Blackwood was the kind of man people whispered about, even in rooms where his name wasn't supposed to be spoken. At 37, he owned half of Boston's most powerful businesses. Hotels, real estate, private investments, the kind of wealth that moved quietly but controlled everything. But money wasn't what made people fear him. It was the silence. Harrison never yelled. Never lost his temper in public. He didn't need to. One cold look from his steel blue eyes was enough to make grown men stumble over their words. Employees called him the Stone Man. Not because he was strict. Because he felt nothing. That morning, his private physician stood in his study, hands trembling as he packed his medical bag. "Mr. Blackwood, your blood pressure is dangerously high. The headaches you're having, this isn't stress anymore. You need rest. Real rest. Tests. Maybe surgery." Harrison didn't raise his voice. "You're fired." The doctor froze. "Sir, I'm only trying to—" "I don't pay you to tell me how to live my life," Harrison said calmly, his voice low and sharp. "You're done here. My assistant will handle your final payment." The doctor left quickly. But the moment the door closed, Harrison's hand shot to the edge of his desk. A crushing pain exploded behind his eyes. His vision blurred. The room tilted. For a second, just a second, the most powerful man in the building almost fell. He gritted his teeth and forced himself upright. Weakness was a luxury he had buried 20 years ago. No one could know. Because if people smelled weakness, they didn't offer help. They circled. Down in the basement of the Blackwood mansion, life looked very different. The walls were plain. The room was small. The air carried the faint smell of detergent and old stone. Rosalie Turner sat on the floor folding a pile of white towels, her back bent, her fingers cracked from endless work. Her 2 daughters, 6-year-old twins, sat beside her. Zoe and Ruby. Same brown curls. Same green eyes. Same quiet way of watching the world, like they understood more than children should. They wore simple gray dresses and helped fold each towel carefully, corner to corner. "Mom," Ruby whispered, "you're hurting again." Rosalie forced a smile. "Just tired, honey." But Zoe had already moved behind her. "Don't move," the little girl said softly. 2 small hands rested on Rosalie's lower back. Warmth spread through her muscles, slow, gentle, like someone loosening knots deep under her skin. The pain faded. Completely. Rosalie closed her eyes for a moment. She had seen this before. Many times. And every time, it scared her. Because 2 years ago, her daughters had healed a stray cat with a broken leg. The bone had straightened. The bleeding had stopped. There was no explanation. Only a miracle. "Remember what I told you," Rosalie said quietly, pulling them close. "No one can ever see you do this. People don't understand things like this." Ruby nodded. "They'll think we're strange?" "They won't think you're strange," Rosalie whispered. "They'll think you're valuable. And when people think you're valuable, they don't protect you. They use you." The girls held her tighter. 8 months earlier, their lives had been ordinary. Rosalie worked at a bakery. Their apartment was small, but warm. Their father read them bedtime stories every night. Until the night everything ended. The front door had been kicked open. Men in suits dragged Daniel Turner to his knees in the living room. And then Harrison Blackwood walked in. He looked calm, polished, like a businessman stopping by for a meeting. $2 million, he said quietly. 18 months. Not one payment. Daniel begged, cried, promised. Harrison listened. Then he pulled out a gun. Rosalie never forgot the sound. Afterward, Harrison looked at her the way someone looks at paperwork. "The debt is yours now," he said. "You can work it off, or your daughters will be sold." That was how they came to the mansion. That was how Rosalie became a servant working 18 hours a day. That was how Zoe and Ruby learned to live like ghosts. Back upstairs, late that afternoon, Harrison sat at the head of a long conference table while his executives discussed contracts and numbers. His expression never changed. Until the pain came again. Sudden. Violent. Blinding. His hand tightened under the table. Across the room, his assistant Jasper leaned close. "Sir, Blake Morrison is making moves. He's been meeting with some of our partners." Harrison's eyes opened slowly. Blake Morrison. Younger. Hungry. Ambitious. The kind of man who waited for powerful people to weaken. Harrison gave a faint, cold smile. "Let him wait," he said. But when the meeting ended and the room emptied, Harrison tried to stand. His knees gave out. He collapsed to the floor, clutching his head, breath coming in short, rough bursts. For 15 minutes, the man who controlled millions lay there alone, fighting pain like a wounded animal. No witnesses. No help. Because power had given him everything. Except someone who cared if he survived. That same evening, in the basement, Zoe suddenly stopped folding a towel. Her small hands went still. Ruby looked at her. "You feel it too?" Zoe nodded slowly, her green eyes lifting toward the ceiling. "There's something wrong with him," she whispered. "What kind of wrong?" Zoe swallowed. Something dark, growing inside his head. Upstairs, at that exact moment, Harrison Blackwood staggered against a hallway wall, the world spinning around him. And for the first time in 20 years, fear crept into his eyes. Because somewhere deep down, he knew. This wasn't just a headache. Something inside him was slowly killing him. And in the basement below, 2 little girls were the only ones who could feel it. That night, Harrison didn't sleep. The pain came in waves, dull at first, then sharp enough to steal his breath. He sat alone in his dark bedroom, one hand pressed against his temple, the other gripping the edge of the nightstand until his knuckles turned pale. The city lights of Boston stretched outside his window, cold and distant. 4 years, that view had made him feel powerful. Tonight, it made him feel small. Somewhere in the house, life went on. Staff moved quietly. Security walked their rounds. Business emails kept coming in. But for the first time in his life, Harrison felt something he didn't recognize. Time slipping away. He opened the drawer beside his bed and shook 2 pain pills into his palm. Then 2 more. He swallowed them dry. Across the mansion, deep in the basement, Zoe sat upright in her bed. Ruby stirred beside her. "It's worse, isn't it?" Zoe nodded slowly. "The dark thing, it's growing." "How big now?" Zoe hesitated. Her small face tightened. "Like an orange," she whispered. "And it's spreading." Ruby pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. "Is he going to die?" Zoe didn't answer right away. She looked toward the ceiling again, as if she could see through the floors above. "I don't know," she said finally. "But he's scared." In the small room, Rosalie lay awake, listening to her daughter's whisper. She didn't move, didn't speak. Because the truth was, she had noticed it too. Over the past few weeks, Harrison had been different. He moved slower. Sometimes she saw him pause in the hallway, his hand braced against the wall. Once, she had emptied a trash bin in his office and found 3 empty bottles of prescription painkillers. And yesterday morning, she had seen something that unsettled her more than anything else. Harrison had walked past her on the 2nd floor. Then suddenly stopped. For a moment, his eyes had lost focus. His face went pale. His breathing turned shallow. Then he straightened, adjusted his suit, and kept walking like nothing had happened. But Rosalie knew that look. It was the look of someone fighting something they couldn't control. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with unusual activity. Black cars lined the driveway. Security doubled their positions. Staff were ordered to move quickly and stay out of sight. Zoe and Ruby sat quietly near the basement stairs while Rosalie folded linens nearby. "What's going on?" Ruby whispered. "Important guests," Rosalie answered softly. "Stay down here today. Don't wander." Upstairs, the great hall had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers glowed. Long tables were set with expensive wine and polished silver. Powerful men in tailored suits arrived one by one, their voices low, their smiles careful. This wasn't a party. This was a show of power. Harrison stood at the center of it all, dressed in black, his posture straight, his expression calm. No one could see the tremor in his fingers hidden behind the glass of wine. No one knew he had taken 4 pills before coming down. And no one noticed the faint sheen of sweat at his temples. From a corner of the hall, Rosalie moved quietly with a tray of drinks, her eyes lowered just like Maggie had instructed. But she watched. She saw the way Harrison greeted each guest without warmth. She saw the way his assistant Jasper never left his side. And she saw something else. When a tall man with sharp features and a confident smile walked through the doors, the entire room shifted. Blake Morrison. He moved like someone who didn't ask for space. He expected it. He stopped 2 steps from Harrison. "Well," Blake said casually, glancing him over, "you don't look as strong as you used to." The room went quiet. Harrison didn't react. "You're still standing," Blake continued, his tone almost friendly. "I'll give you that. But rumors travel fast. Doctors coming and going. Meetings cut short. You sure you're still in shape to run everything?" Jasper took a step forward, his hand near his jacket. Harrison lifted a finger slightly. Jasper stopped. Then Harrison spoke, his voice low and calm. "I'll step down," he said, "when I'm dead." Blake smiled. "Then I guess we won't have to wait long." Rosalie's hands tightened around the tray. The words weren't loud, but they carried something cold, something final. Blake leaned closer, his voice dropping. "When strong men start falling," he murmured, "someone has to be ready to take their place." Then he walked away, greeting other guests as if nothing had happened. For the rest of the evening, Harrison remained on his feet, talking, listening, nodding. But the pain was building. By midnight, his vision had begun to blur again. Jasper leaned toward him. "Sir, you should rest." Harrison shook his head. "Not yet." Across the mansion, Rosalie had just returned to the basement when Zoe suddenly grabbed her arm. "Mom." Rosalie turned. "What is it?" Zoe's face had gone pale. "It's happening," she whispered. "What is?" Zoe looked toward the ceiling, her voice trembling. "The dark thing. It just burst." At that exact moment, upstairs in the great hall, Harrison Blackwood took one step forward. And collapsed. The sound of the glass hitting the marble floor came a second after he fell. It shattered, sharp and loud, cutting through the quiet conversations like a gunshot. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos broke loose. "Harrison!" Jasper was the first to reach him, dropping to his knees as the powerful man's body jerked violently against the floor. Harrison's hands clawed at nothing, his face drained of color, his eyes rolling back. Someone shouted for a doctor. Another guest stepped away quickly, pulling out his phone. Across the room, Blake Morrison didn't move at all. He just watched. The faintest smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Harrison, can you hear me?" Jasper's voice cracked as he tried to steady him. Harrison's body convulsed again. Foam gathered at the edge of his lips. His breathing came in broken, shallow bursts. A physician pushed through the crowd and dropped beside him, checking his pulse, shining a light into his eyes. His expression changed almost immediately. "This is bad," he muttered. "How bad?" Jasper demanded. The doctor hesitated, then said it anyway. "Brain hemorrhage. Severe. If he doesn't get surgery immediately, he won't make it." "How long do we have?" The doctor swallowed. "Maybe 15 minutes. The word spread through the room like a cold wind. Some men stepped back. Others exchanged quiet looks. Power had rules. Loyalty had limits. And when a powerful man started dying, the room always began to calculate. In the basement, Rosalie's heart dropped when she heard the footsteps above, fast, heavy, running. Then the distant sound of shouting. Zoe's small hand tightened around hers. "He's dying," the little girl whispered. Ruby's eyes filled with tears. "The dark thing broke open," she said. "There's blood everywhere inside his head." Rosalie froze. For 8 months, she had hated that man. For 8 months, she had prayed for justice, for freedom, for something to change. And now it was happening. But instead of relief, she felt something else. Fear. Because power didn't disappear when a powerful man died. It shifted. And whoever replaced Harrison might not keep them in the house to work off a debt. They might sell the girls. Fast. Efficient. Profitable. Upstairs, the great hall had fallen into tense silence. Harrison's body had stopped convulsing. But that wasn't a good sign. His chest barely moved. His lips were turning blue. Jasper stood beside him, pale and shaking. "Call the helicopter," he ordered. "Now." The doctor shook his head slowly. "Even if it arrives in 10 minutes, the pressure in his brain is already critical. If he survives, he'll likely have permanent damage. If he doesn't get help immediately." He didn't finish. Across the room, Blake stepped closer to one of the other businessmen. Quietly, calmly. "When a king falls," he murmured, "the throne doesn't stay empty for long." Downstairs, Ruby's voice broke the silence. "Mom, we can help him." Rosalie turned sharply. "No." Zoe stepped forward. "We can stop the bleeding. We can make the pressure go down." "No," Rosalie repeated, her voice shaking now. "You promised me. No one can ever see what you can do." Ruby's tears spilled over. "But if we don't, he'll die. Maybe that's what he deserves." The words came out before Rosalie could stop them. The room went still. Zoe looked up at her, not angry, not hurt, just quiet. "If someone is dying," she said softly, "and we can save them, aren't we supposed to help?" Rosalie opened her mouth. No words came out. Because the truth was, her daughters didn't understand revenge. They didn't understand justice the way adults did. They only understood pain. And how to stop it. Ruby wiped her cheeks. "If we let him die when we could help, will we feel okay later?" Rosalie's chest tightened. She thought of Daniel. She thought of the night he fell. She thought of 8 months on her knees, scrubbing floors until her hands bled. She thought of the basement, the fear, the humiliation. Then she looked at her daughters. 6 years old. Small hands. Hearts that still believed the world could be kind. Upstairs, Harrison's breathing slowed again. The doctor looked at Jasper. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Jasper didn't answer. For the first time in 15 years, the man who never left Harrison's side looked helpless. A sudden movement near the entrance caught everyone's attention. An older man rushed in, his face pale, his coat half-buttoned. "Harrison!" Sterling Blackwood dropped to his knees beside his son, lifting his head with shaking hands. "My boy! No, no, stay with me!" His voice broke. In the corner of the room, Blake checked his watch. In the basement, Rosalie took a long, trembling breath. Then she knelt in front of her daughters. "If you do this," she whispered, "everyone will know. They'll see what you can do. We won't be invisible anymore." Zoe nodded. "I know. They might take you away from me." Ruby stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her. "We won't let them." Rosalie closed her eyes. For 8 months, she had survived by staying small, quiet, invisible. But tonight wasn't about survival. It was about the kind of people her daughters were growing up to be. When she opened her eyes again, something inside her had settled. "Stay close to me," she said softly. Upstairs, Sterling's voice broke again. "Do something. Somebody save him." And then the doors at the back of the great hall slowly opened. Several people turned. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. Just a maid and 2 little girls, walking straight toward the most powerful man in the room, who was dying on the floor. At first, no one moved. The great hall was filled with powerful men, expensive suits, and people who were used to controlling everything around them. And yet, the quiet footsteps of a poor maid and her 2 small daughters seemed to freeze the entire room. Rosalie walked slowly, her hands wrapped tightly around Zoe and Ruby's fingers. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Every instinct in her body told her to turn around, to go back to the basement, to stay invisible. But she kept walking, because behind her fear was something stronger. 2 little girls who believed saving a life mattered more than their own safety. When they were only a few steps away, Jasper moved in front of them. His hand went to his jacket. "Stop," he said sharply. "No one gets near him." Rosalie stopped, but she didn't step back. "Please," she said, her voice shaking but steady enough to hold. "My daughters can help him." Jasper stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "This is not the time for—" "If you don't let us try," she cut in quietly, "he's going to die." The words hung there. Jasper looked down at Harrison's still body, then at the doctor, who slowly shook his head, then back at Rosalie. "What can 2 kids possibly do?" he asked. Rosalie swallowed. "I don't know how to explain it," she said honestly. "But they've helped people before. They can feel what's wrong inside someone." Jasper hesitated. Across the room, Blake gave a small, amused shake of his head, clearly enjoying the scene. But then Sterling spoke. "Let them try." His voice was hoarse, broken. The old man looked at Zoe and Ruby with desperate eyes. "I don't care if it sounds crazy," he said. "I've got nothing left to lose." Jasper held Rosalie's gaze for another long second. Then he stepped aside. "If anything happens to him," he said quietly, "you understand what that means." Rosalie nodded once. Then she knelt beside her daughters. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Zoe and Ruby looked at each other, then nodded. The girls walked forward together. The room was silent now. Not a whisper. Not a breath. They knelt beside Harrison's body. Zoe placed her small hands gently on his temples. Ruby put hers over his chest, right above his heart. Both girls closed their eyes. At first, nothing happened. Several men shifted uncomfortably. The doctor took a step forward. Mrs. Turner, this isn't. Then he stopped. A faint glow appeared beneath the girl's hands. Soft, warm, like sunlight through a window. It wasn't bright or dramatic. Just gentle, steady, alive. The light spread slowly across Harrison's face and chest. Around the room, people stepped back. Some stared in disbelief. Others crossed themselves quietly. Sterling dropped to his knees, tears running down his face. Zoe's breathing became heavier. Ruby's shoulders began to tremble. The glow deepened. Minute by minute, their small bodies seemed to grow weaker. Rosalie's hands clenched at her sides. Every instinct screamed at her to pull them away. But she didn't move. Because she knew this was the choice they had made. And this was the kind of people they were. After several long minutes, Harrison's chest jerked. A sharp breath filled his lungs. Then another. The glow faded. Zoe's hands slipped from his head. Ruby swayed, her face pale. The doctor dropped beside Harrison immediately, checking his pulse, his eyes wide. That's not possible, he whispered. The pulse was strong. Breathing steady. Color slowly returned to Harrison's face. Around the room, stunned silence spread. Blake Morrison's smile disappeared. Sterling let out a broken sound and leaned over his son, his shoulders shaking. Zoe and Ruby collapsed back against their mother, completely drained. Rosalie wrapped her arms around them, holding them close, her own tears falling freely now. "You did good," she whispered. "You did so good." A few moments later, Harrison's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, confused. Then they settled. And the first thing he saw was Rosalie, sitting on the floor, holding the two small girls who looked exhausted but calm. He stared at them for a long time. Not cold, not distant, just quiet. "What happened?" he asked hoarsely. No one answered right away, because no one in that room had ever seen anything like what had just happened. Within minutes, the medical helicopter was called anyway. Doctors insisted on full tests. Harrison didn't argue. But the entire flight, he kept remembering something. When he collapsed, there had been darkness. Cold, empty, endless. And then, inside that darkness, warmth, soft light. Two small faces looking at him without fear. Without hatred. Only compassion. 3 days later, in a private hospital room, a team of specialists stood around his scans, shaking their heads. "The tumor is gone," one of them said slowly. Sterling frowned. "Gone? Completely. No trace. No damage from the hemorrhage either. It's like it never existed." Harrison lay there silently, because he already knew the answer. Later that evening, he asked Jasper one question. "The woman," he said quietly, "and the two girls, who are they?" Jasper hesitated. Then he told him everything. About Daniel Turner. About the night in the living room. About the debt. About the basement. About the two little girls who had lived like ghosts for 8 months. When he finished, the room was very quiet. Harrison stared at the ceiling. 6 years old. They had watched him kill their father. They had grown up in his house like prisoners. And when he was dying, they had saved him. After a long time, Harrison spoke again. "Bring them to the mansion," he said. Jasper nodded. But as he turned to leave, Harrison added one more line, his voice lower than before. "And Jasper." "Yes, sir." Harrison's eyes didn't move from the ceiling. "For the first time in my life, I think I owe someone more than money." Back at the mansion, that same afternoon, Rosalie stood in the garden watching Zoe and Ruby play quietly in the grass. For the first time in months, they looked like normal children. Laughing, running, free. She should have felt relieved. But instead, a strange uneasiness sat in her chest, because she knew something had changed. Inside the house, footsteps approached. Jasper stopped a few feet away. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you," he said. Rosalie's fingers tightened around each other. "Now?" Jasper nodded. "And the girls too." Zoe and Ruby looked up from the grass. Rosalie forced a calm smile. But as she took their hands and walked toward the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever waited behind those doors was going to change their lives again. Rosalie's steps slowed as they reached the main doors. For 8 months, this house had been a place of orders, silence, and survival. Every hallway held memories she didn't want. Every polished floor reminded her of how many hours she had spent on her knees. Now she was walking inside again, not as a maid called to clean, but as someone the owner had asked to see. That felt more dangerous. Zoe squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mom," she whispered. Ruby nodded. "He's not sick anymore." Rosalie didn't answer, because sickness wasn't what she was afraid of. Power was. Jasper led them through the long corridor and stopped in front of a large wooden door. He knocked once, then opened it. "Sir, they're here." Rosalie stepped inside slowly, keeping the girls close. Harrison stood near the window, his back to them. The afternoon light outlined his tall frame, making him look exactly the way he always had, controlled, distant, untouchable. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he turned. And for the first time, Rosalie noticed something she had never seen before. There was no tension in his face. No shadow of pain behind his eyes. He looked calm. But his gaze wasn't cold either. It rested on Zoe and Ruby first. Not with authority. With something quieter. "Careful." "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was steady, but softer than she remembered. Rosalie didn't move closer. "We didn't have a choice," she answered honestly. The words weren't rude. Just real. Harrison nodded once, accepting that. He took a few steps forward, then stopped at a respectful distance. For a moment, he seemed unsure what to say next. That alone surprised Rosalie more than anything else. Finally, he looked down at the girls. "I have a question," he said. Zoe and Ruby looked up at him. "Why did you help me?" The room went quiet. Rosalie felt her chest tighten, because that question mattered more than anything else he could have asked. Ruby answered first. "Because you were hurting." Harrison blinked slightly. Zoe added, her voice calm and simple. "When someone is hurting, we try to help. That's what Mom says." Rosalie hadn't realized her hands were shaking until that moment. Harrison looked at them for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "I see." He straightened and turned his attention to Rosalie. "The debt is cancelled," he said. The words were direct. Final. "You and your daughters are free. You can leave whenever you want. I'll arrange transportation, housing, and enough money for you to start over." Silence filled the room. Rosalie stared at him. She had imagined many outcomes. Punishment. Suspicion. Even threats. But not this. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then something inside her broke loose. "You think that fixes it?" she asked quietly. Harrison didn't react. "You think saying you're free erases 8 months?" Her voice shook now, but she didn't stop. 8 months of working 18 hours a day. 8 months of my daughters hiding like they didn't exist. Harrison lowered his eyes slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "And my husband?" Rosalie's voice cracked. "Does canceling a debt bring him back?" The room felt heavy. The girls stood silently beside her. Harrison took the words without defense. Without excuses. "I know it doesn't," he said finally. His voice was low. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Rosalie laughed once, a hollow sound. Good. Because I don't. Harrison nodded again. You shouldn't. That answer stopped her. There was no anger in him. No pride. Just acceptance. But your daughters, he continued, glancing at the girls, don't deserve to stay here another day. Whatever you feel about me, they deserve a life outside this house. Rosalie looked at Zoe and Ruby. They were watching Harrison, not with fear, but with curiosity. Then something unexpected happened. Ruby stepped forward. Before Rosalie could stop her, the little girl wrapped her arms around Harrison's leg. I'm glad you're okay, she said. Harrison froze. Ruby looked up at him, smiling gently. The dark thing is gone. You don't hurt any more. Zoe stepped forward too and took his hand. You look different, she said. For several seconds, Harrison didn't move at all. Then slowly, carefully, he lowered himself to one knee. Not like a powerful man. Like someone afraid to break the moment. No, he said quietly. I don't hurt any more. Rosalie watched, her emotions tangled and confused. This was the man who had taken everything from her. And yet, the girls saw something in him she couldn't. Or maybe, something she didn't want to see. After a long silence, she spoke again. We won't leave today, she said. Harrison looked up. I need time, she continued. I don't have a home. I don't have a job. Give me 2 weeks to figure things out. Harrison nodded immediately. Take all the time you need. She hesitated, then added, and until we leave, we stay where we are. The basement? Harrison asked quietly. Yes. He didn't argue. Whatever makes you comfortable. That was the last thing he said before standing and stepping back, giving them space again. But as Rosalie turned to leave, she noticed something. His eyes followed the girls. Not like an owner watching employees. Like someone afraid they might disappear. The next morning, Maggie came to the basement early. The boss sent me, she said gently. Rosalie stiffened. What now? Maggie hesitated, then smiled. He said you don't need to stay down here anymore. There's a room prepared for you and the girls on the 2nd floor. Rosalie's first instinct was to refuse. But then she looked at Zoe and Ruby. Their eyes were already wide with hope. We'll go see it, she said finally. The room was bright. Large windows overlooked the garden. 2 small beds with soft blankets. A bookshelf filled with children's books. For a moment, Zoe and Ruby just stood there. Then Ruby ran to the window. Mom, there's sunlight in here. Zoe touched the books carefully, like they were something fragile. Rosalie stood in the doorway, unable to move. She had come into this house as a prisoner. Now her daughters were being given a childhood again. That evening, as the girls fell asleep in real beds for the first time in months, Rosalie sat beside the window, staring out at the garden. Something was changing. Not fast. Not simple. But something real. Down the hallway, outside their door, a shadow paused for a moment. Harrison stood there quietly, listening to the soft sound of the girls laughing inside. He didn't knock. He didn't go in. He just stood there for a long time. And for the first time in 22 years, the silence around him didn't feel empty anymore. The days that followed felt unfamiliar. Not uncomfortable. Just strange. For 8 months, Rosalie had lived by one rule: survive the day, keep her head down, protect her girls. Now, for the first time, no one was watching her with a stopwatch. No one was ordering her to hurry. No one was reminding her that she owed a debt. The 2nd floor room slowly began to feel lived in. Zoe and Ruby lined their books neatly on the shelf. Crayon drawings appeared on the desk. Their quiet laughter drifted into the hallway every afternoon. And every time Rosalie heard it, something inside her chest loosened. But the past didn't disappear that easily. Every morning when she woke up, there was still a moment, just 1 second, when she expected the basement ceiling above her. Then she saw sunlight instead. And she didn't know whether to feel grateful or guilty. On the third day, a woman arrived at the house. She introduced herself kindly, with a warm smile and a soft voice. "I'm Miss Eleanor," she said. "Mr. Blackwood asked me to help the girls with reading and basic schoolwork." Rosalie hesitated. Her first instinct was suspicion. Nothing in this house had ever come without a reason. But when Zoe opened her first book and slowly read a sentence out loud, her eyes shining with pride, Rosalie couldn't say no. Later that afternoon, as she passed the study hallway, she heard voices inside. She hadn't meant to listen. But the door was slightly open. "You're going soft." The voice was Vince, one of the senior managers. Rosalie froze. Inside the room, Harrison didn't answer immediately. "You canceled a $2 million debt," Vince continued. "You're moving a maid and her kids into better rooms. You hired a private tutor for them. People are talking." A long silence followed. Then Harrison spoke. "I didn't forgive a debt." Vince sounded confused. "Then what is this?" "I'm paying one," Harrison said quietly. Rosalie felt something tighten in her chest. "They saved my life," Harrison continued. "They had every reason not to. And I don't take something that valuable without paying it back." His voice wasn't emotional. It was calm. Simple. Like a rule he believed in. Vince scoffed. "They're just kids." "They're the only reason I'm alive," Harrison replied. The room fell silent again. Then his tone changed slightly. "And if anyone thinks that makes me weak," he added, colder now, "they're welcome to test that theory." Rosalie stepped back quietly before the conversation ended. Her heart was beating faster than it should. Because that hadn't sounded like guilt. Or charity. It sounded like something else. Respect. That night, after the girls were asleep, she went downstairs for water. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles deep into old walls. As she passed the study again, she noticed light under the door. And voices. This time, she recognized the second one. Sterling. "You've changed," the older man said gently. A pause. "Maybe," Harrison answered. "You're sleeping again," Sterling continued. "You're eating. You're not working yourself into the ground. And the way you look at those girls." Rosalie didn't mean to listen. But she couldn't move. "They remind me of Mom," Harrison said finally. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. Another silence. Then Sterling spoke again, his tone heavy. "You were 15 when she died." Rosalie held her breath. "I remember everything," Harrison said quietly. "The night they brought her back. The box on the doorstep." Sterling's voice broke. "I should have protected her." "You couldn't," Harrison replied. Rosalie pressed her hand against the wall. She had heard rumors about Harrison's past, but never details. "I opened that box," Harrison continued. "I was the one who saw her first." His voice stayed calm. Too calm. "I remember thinking something inside me just shut off. Like if I didn't feel anything, nothing could ever hurt me again." Sterling didn't speak. "I built everything after that," Harrison went on. "The business. The reputation. The control. Because power means no one gets close enough to take something from you." Another long silence. Then his voice changed. Quieter. "But those girls, they didn't see any of that." Rosalie's chest tightened. They saw someone in pain, Harrison said. After everything I did to their family, they still chose to help me. Sterling asked gently, "What did that feel like?" Harrison didn't answer right away. Finally, he said one word. "Shame." The silence that followed was heavy. "I've hurt a lot of people," he continued. "I told myself it was business. Survival. The only way to live in this world." His voice lowered. "But when a 6-year-old looks at you like you're worth saving, it makes you wonder what you became." Rosalie stepped back slowly, her throat tight. She returned to the second-floor room without getting water. When she slipped into bed beside her daughters, she held them closer than usual. For the first time, her anger toward Harrison didn't feel clean anymore. It felt complicated. The next afternoon, she sat on the garden bench while Zoe and Ruby ran across the grass. Their laughter carried through the air. For months, she had only seen them quiet, careful, small. Now they ran without looking over their shoulders. And for a moment, Rosalie allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But that feeling didn't last. Because across the lawn, near the security gate, she noticed something. Jasper was speaking urgently to a guard. His expression was tight, serious. A moment later, he turned and headed quickly toward the house. Rosalie's stomach dropped. Instinct. The kind a mother develops after too many things go wrong. Something wasn't right. And somewhere, far from the mansion, in a quiet office overlooking the city, Blake Morrison was smiling as he studied a report. 2 names were circled on the page. Zoe. Ruby. He leaned back in his chair. "If I can't break Harrison Blackwood," he murmured, "I'll take the only thing that matters to him." Then he picked up his phone. "Get the team ready," he said. "We move soon." Jasper didn't wait. Within minutes of receiving the intelligence, he was already inside Harrison's study, closing the door behind him. "Sir," he said quietly, "we have a problem." Harrison looked up from the papers on his desk. One look at Jasper's face told him this wasn't business. "Blake?" he asked. Jasper nodded. "He knows about the girls. Our source says he's planning a grab. Not for you, for them." The room went still. For a long moment, Harrison didn't move. Then he stood. Slowly. Calmly. But there was something different in his eyes now. Not the cold control people feared. This was something deeper. Raw. "He's not touching them," Harrison said. That night, security around the mansion doubled. Cameras were rechecked. Guards were repositioned. Rosalie noticed the tension immediately. "What's happening?" she asked Maggie. Maggie hesitated, then answered honestly. "Someone thinks your girls are valuable." The word made Rosalie's stomach turn. That evening, Harrison found her in the garden, watching Zoe and Ruby play. "They're not safe here anymore," he said quietly. Rosalie turned, fear already rising. "What do you mean?" "Blake Morrison is coming for them." Her hands tightened instantly. "Then we leave. Tonight." Harrison shook his head. "He's watching the exits. If you run, he'll take you on the road." Silence fell between them. Then Rosalie asked the question she didn't want to ask. "What are you going to do?" Harrison looked at the girls running across the grass, their laughter floating in the air. For the first time in years, his voice carried something close to emotion. "I'm going to end this." The attack came 2 nights later. Just after 2 a.m. The power cut first. Then the security alarms. Then the sound of gunfire shattered the quiet. Rosalie woke instantly. Years of fear had trained her body well. "Girls! Now!" Zoe and Ruby ran to her as footsteps thundered through the hall. Somewhere downstairs, men were shouting. More shots echoed through the house. Zoe grabbed her hand. "They're here for us," she whispered. Rosalie pulled them into the closet and locked the door. "Stay quiet. No matter what you hear." Downstairs, Harrison moved through the darkness with Jasper at his side. This wasn't business anymore. This wasn't power. This was protection. Two men came through the kitchen doors. They didn't even see Harrison before he stepped from the shadows. The fight was fast, brutal, quiet. Within minutes, the intruders were down. But more kept coming. Blake had sent 20 men. By the time Harrison reached the second floor, blood soaked his sleeve from a bullet that had grazed his shoulder. He didn't slow down. He kicked open the bedroom door. "Rosalie!" The closet opened immediately. The girls ran straight to him. "You're hurt," Ruby cried. "I'm fine," he said, dropping to one knee and pulling all three of them into his arms. And in that moment, something inside him broke open. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have protected you sooner. I swear. No one will ever take you from me again." Outside the room, the fighting stopped. Jasper appeared in the doorway. "It's over." Blake Morrison had been captured alive. At sunrise, Harrison made a decision no one expected. He called the FBI. Blake was handed over with full evidence of trafficking, weapons, and illegal operations. By the end of the day, the man who had tried to destroy him was gone for good. That afternoon, Harrison gathered his remaining executives. "The illegal operations end," he told them. "All of it." Within 3 years, this company goes legitimate. Real estate, hospitals, community projects. Some men left that day, but most stayed, because for the first time, they weren't following a powerful man. They were following a better one. Weeks passed, then months. The mansion changed. The silence disappeared. Crayon drawings appeared on the walls. Laughter filled the hallways. The basement door stayed locked, not to keep anyone in, but because no one needed it anymore. The Turner Blackwood Foundation opened 6 months later, offering free medical care to families who couldn't afford it. Rosalie stood beside Harrison at the opening ceremony. She looked at him differently now. Not as the man who had taken everything, but as the man who had chosen to give something back. That evening, in the garden, Zoe and Ruby were learning to ride their bicycles. "I'm scared," Zoe shouted as she wobbled forward. "I'm right here," Harrison said, running behind her, holding the seat. "I won't let you fall." After a few steps, he let go. Zoe rode on her own for the first time. Then she fell into the grass. Harrison rushed over instantly. "Are you hurt?" She looked at her scraped knee. Then she looked at him. And instead of using her gift to heal it, she held out her arms. "Can you fix it, Daddy Harrison?" The word hit him like a wave. For 22 years, he had lived without a family. Without warmth. Without anyone who needed him for anything but power. He lifted her carefully and pressed her close. "I've got you," he whispered. Nearby, Ruby ran over and hugged his leg. Rosalie stood a few steps away, watching. For the first time since the night her husband died, she didn't feel like life had taken everything from her. Because sometimes, healing doesn't come from forgetting the past. It comes from choosing what you build after it. That night, the four of them sat together in the living room while Maggie brought out warm apple pie. Sterling told stories. Jasper stood outside, smiling quietly. And Rosalie rested her head gently against Harrison's shoulder. The house that once felt like a prison now felt like something else. A home. Because in the end, the real miracle wasn't the girl's gift. It was this. The most powerful man in the room had been changed. Not by money, not by fear, not by power. but by the kindness of two poor little girls who chose compassion over hatred. And sometimes, the smallest hands really do heal the hardest hearts. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, which country or region are you watching from?